We're going to work one more of these on, what are we doing? Completing the square? Yeah, we'll work one more. So 3x squared plus 5x minus 4 is equal to 0. We want to get a 1 as the coefficient, and that means that we'll have to multiply by 1/3 all the way through so that we get a 1 right here. Okay. So we end up with x squared plus 5/3 x minus 4/3 equals 0. All right, equals 0. So we go ahead, bring the x down, bring this sign down. We take a half of this, so that's going to make that 5/6, 5/6. Then we square it, go minus, and then we square this number here and put it right here. So that's going to be 25. We'll square the numerator, then square the denominator, and that's 36 minus, go ahead and rewrite the 43 minus 4/3. Now if you want, you can go ahead and simplify this fraction down, and I think that's probably what I'm going to do. And of course I'm going to cheat. You better crank it out by hand. All right. So we have x plus 5/6, and I'm going to go ahead and so I get 73 over 36, and it's of course minus 73 over 36. Take it over to the right and we get 73 over 36. Now of course we'll square root both sides, and I'm going to go ahead and take over. So I'm going to skip a couple steps here. I'm going to square rooting both sides, and I'm going to take this 5/6 over, so this becomes minus 5/6. Right, now remember, this is plus or minus the square root of 73 over 36. Now 36 is a perfect square, so we could actually break this up. And I'm just going to write it over here. Okay, so we'll write it over here. So we have negative 5/6 plus or minus the square root of 73 over, let's see what we could say, so the square root of 36 is 6. Okay, so remember, both your solutions are negative 5/6 plus the square root of 73 over 6 and negative 5/6 minus the square root of 73 over 6. So I want to keep that in mind there. Alright, we're going to have to do some erasing here. Okay, that didn't work out. Take a second to break somewhat. I should probably just delete, and then I'm sure there's a better way of doing this. I hadn't figured out how to pause the video. Not sure that you can. I'm constantly using some kind of new software for screen recording, and this one here is actually made by Adobe. It seems to be working fairly well. I don't know what's going on here. Why didn't... Okay. So what we're going to be doing next, what are we doing next? Oh, we're going to derive up the formula, the quadratic formula. We're going to derive that up from what we've learned with the quadratic, or the completing the square. Quadratic formula. It's a nightmare for a lot of students for some reason. I was helping in a math lab one time, and I told this girl she was going to have to learn the quadratic. She was going to have to memorize the quadratic formula, and she looked at me and started crying and says, I'll never be able to do that. And the girl next to her looked at me, or the girl to my left, she was to my right, the girl I was helping, the girl to my left looked at me and said, you are so mean. Anyway. Okay, so we're going to come up with the quadratic formula now. Do we remember the quadratic formula? If not, I'll write it out. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and it's all over 2a. Alright, so if you write this a few times, you shouldn't have any problems memorizing it. Alright, well, this is what we start with. We start with ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and we have to say that a cannot equal to 0 here. Alright, because if it did, well, then this term here would just be 0. Alright, so we're going to complete the square on this, and we're going to come up with this guy right here. It's not that bad. So what does this mean? We got to get a 1 right here. So that means we're going to multiply through by 1 over a all the way through. So that's going to leave this with x squared plus b over a x plus c over a. You can kind of see this b over a right here? Well, anyway, you'll start seeing it to develop into this thing here. Right, so we just bring the x down, bring down the sign. We take half of this, so in other words, multiplying this by half, you end up getting b over 2a. And that is part of, right, the quadratic formula. We go minus, we always go minus, and then we square this. So this would be b squared over, and then you can square that number 4, and square the a is a squared, plus c over a is equal to 0. So we want to go ahead and add these two fractions here together, but we need to get a common denominator. We'll go ahead and rewrite. Alright, so what do I don't have down here? I don't have a 4, and I need another a. So we're going to go 4a on top and 4a on bottom. And I guess I'll just go ahead and rewrite the rest of this stuff. Okay. All right. What do we got? B squared let me just go ahead and rewrite here. X plus b over 2a. So we have b squared over 4a squared plus 4ac. We're just going to reorder this up here. It's okay. 4a squared. Right, so this is a times a squared, 4a squared. Okay, set it equal to 0. We'll go ahead and rewrite. And now I'll go ahead and take that stuff over to the right hand side of the equal sign. Taking this over, we have b squared, and then we'll go ahead and combine it here just in 1 second. squared. So we have common denominator. So I can rewrite this as b squared minus 4ac, and it's all over 4a squared. So that should look familiar. Really familiar. Of course, now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and square root both sides. So we have the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared, and this is plus or minus, remember, don't forget that. Okay, and now what we'll do is go ahead and take this over, so negative b over 2a plus or minus, and I'm going to go ahead and break this up. We'll have the radical up here in the numerator, b squared minus 4ac over, and if we square root 4a squared, the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of a squared is just a. Alright, so that should be looking really familiar at this point. And of course, since we have a common denominator, I can write negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, and that's all over 2a. So now you know how to derive up the quadratic formula. Well, now that we've derived up the quadratic formula, what we want to do now is I guess try it out. We're going to try it out. Alright, so we'll try it out. In fact, let me go ahead and keep it in the picture. And we will try it out on x squared minus 10x minus 3. And that is equal to 0. Alright, so this is your a is 1. The coefficient in front of this x is negative 10. Well, I wanted to write b is equal to negative 10, and then this last one here, c, is equal to negative 3. So now that we know a, b, and c, we just simply plug it into the formula and simplify. Okay, so here's b, and now look at here, this b down here is negative 10, so we got to watch out. We got a minus up here in the front, so I'm going to write it just like this. See that? And then plus or minus, because that could mess you up. Now we got b squared, got negative 10, and of course we'll simplify all this stuff down here in just a minute. A is 1 and c is negative 3. Alright, and that's all over 2a, which is 1. And of course we'll definitely want to simplify this thing down. So we got a negative and a minus, a negative inside, so that's 10, positive, plus or minus. Right, so negative 10 squared is 100. And then we have a minus and then a negative inside, that's going to make that a positive 12. And of course it's all over 2. X is equal to 10 plus or minus the square root of 112 over 2. The square root of 112 over 2. Now, this can be actually simplified. 112 is equal to 16 times 7, yeah. And that number there is a perfect square. Okay? So actually, you probably want to break this thing completely down. So we end up with the square root of, and I guess I'll write it like this, over 2 but this is 10 plus or minus. Now the square root of 16 is 4, and we can't break down, that's just a prime number, can't break down that anymore. And over 2 there, right? And of course, I guess I shouldn't stop there. We've got 10 over 2 plus 4 over the square root of 7 over 2, and 10 over 2 is 5 plus, and actually I could write, and I should write plus or minus here, plus or minus 2 square roots of 7. Okay, so you got two solutions, 5 plus 2 times square root of 7 and 5 minus 2 times the square root of 7. Alright. Okay.